Well, we've got a lot of very important details which have come in on the ground situation in the south bank of the Pangong Lake in eastern Ladakh, where India and China have been involved in a face-off. Now, the latest that we have is the Indian Army dominates several heights in that disputed area and in doing so is able to command that entire area right up till our perception of the line of actual control. Why is this important? Because on the 29th and 30th, late at night, the Chinese were actually moving tanks, is what we have now learned, or building up their tank forces from their side of the line of actual control, and were trying to move down a road which they have built in that particular area near an area called Spangur. And in an attempt to do that, we're trying to, we believe, unilaterally alter the lay of the line of actual control. So what Indian Army soldiers did is that they actually moved into this disputed area and they physically occupied several of the ridge lines. We are told that this occupation of several of these key ridge lines is now complete, and that the Indian Army now dominates the road which I was referring to and all of the areas. Remember, when one talks about mountain warfare, and these are extreme heights, in many cases above 16,000 feet, whoever owns the highland is in an advantageous position. Therefore, by preempting this Chinese move, that also a move which took place at night, and by establishing ourselves in these high altitude ridge lines and building up strength on these high altitude ridge lines, the Indian Army is now in a position to assert its presence in this area. There have been 2 rounds of talks which have taken place at the brigadier level between India and China. The second round of talks is on right now. There has been no breakthrough as yet, but it's quite clear that India has now shown its intent that if there are any further efforts by the Chinese to try and push into areas which are India's territorial gains without any talk, consultation, or anything like that, India's territorial rights, I should say, then there will be a reaction, and the reaction is what we have seen in this particular case. I would like to stress, and this is very important, that India firmly believes that our actions are entirely defensive in nature. These are not offensive actions. These are defensive actions in response to a Chinese offensive in this particular area. And this is part of a process where we've seen the Chinese make incursions into areas which are disputed. It's happened up north in Depsang, Galwan, where 20 soldiers were killed in action and many other Chinese soldiers died as well. It's happened on the north bank of the Pangong, Gogra, Hot Springs, and now the south bank is where this Chinese attempt was being made, but it was being preempted. So this is perhaps the first really proactive action by the Indian Army, Indian Armed Forces. There's been a very strong reaction, I should also mention, from the Chinese embassy in the last couple of hours. The spokesperson, in the last couple of minutes, in fact, the spokesperson of the Chinese embassy in New Delhi says that India's move has grossly violated China's territorial sovereignty, seriously violated relevant agreements, protocols, and important consensus reached between the 2 countries, severely damaged peace and tranquility along the China-India border areas. What India has done runs counter to the efforts made by both sides for a period of time to ease and cool down the situation on the ground, and China is resolutely opposed to this. This is the strongest ever statement to come out of China since the entire crisis began in eastern Ladakh in the last few months. The question is this: are India and China very much on the brink militarily in that area, perhaps at a local level in South Pangong, perhaps at the regional level in eastern Ladakh, and what can really be done to ensure that the peace holds? Will there be a mutual disengagement? Thus far, that's not really worked out. But India has now played our card in response to Chinese aggression. We dominate the heights in this particular area. It is an extremely fraught and difficult situation that both sides find themselves in. What happens next? No one really knows.
No one really knows. But Vishnu, just staying with the China response to the situation at this point, you are pointing out this is perhaps the strongest we've seen in quite some time.
I believe it's the strongest response, Sonal. I have no doubt about that. India has grossly violated China's territorial sovereignty, severely violated relevant agreements, protocols, and an important consensus, etc. What India has done runs counter to the efforts made by both sides for a period of time. India has severely damaged peace and tranquility along the China-India border areas. But the fact of the matter is that we have seen the Chinese take advantage of the situation in eastern Ladakh by unilaterally attempting to change the line of actual control. The Indian Army has not been able to, or chosen for whatever the reasons were, to proactively respond earlier on. But this time, I think the sense was enough is enough, particularly since this was an effort by the Chinese to open a new front in eastern Ladakh. Remember, the Chinese incursions have already taken place in five areas. They control huge, they technically control huge swaths of territory that we believe to be ours. Now, it's difficult to actually measure how much territory. But this is a new front, that too in an area where India is very strongly enmeshed militarily on the ground. And therefore, for the Chinese to actually do this is an indicator for many within the Indian system that does China at all care about the line of actual control? Are these just words? Or are they going to just push through to areas which they believe are theirs, irrespective of the use of the words line of actual control? Yes, it's disputed, but will there be no respect to the fact that India and China actually do have a line of actual control? The question is where it lies, or will you unilaterally thrust and push that line of control in eastern Ladakh in areas wherever you feel? India has decided enough is enough, and this has been a calculated military move. It's not taken time to act, unlike in the other areas. There was Chinese aggression building, that too overnight. That was not allowed as part of the confidence-building measures in the talks which have taken place thus far. A build-up of Chinese forces is not supposed to take place at night. It did on this occasion, as I mentioned, with tanks. And this is some relatively new detail that we can share. There was a tank build-up taking place on the Chinese side of the line of actual control in the south bank of the Pangong Lake. India reacted, pushed our soldiers in, occupied the heights, and we dominate that disputed area on the basis of occupying the heights. When I use the words dominating the heights, it's important to understand that this doesn't mean that you control every square inch of that area, but whoever controls the high ground in these areas clearly has an advantageous position. It's very much a statement of intent. But again, this is a defensive action taken by the Indian Army to what we believe was another instance of Chinese aggression.